Hi everyone, I'm Airier, and taking a look at BattleTech lore by Sven Vanderplank. This is going to be a complete 500-year histories of the Age of War. This time around, we're actually getting into the Age of War itself. We did all of the preamble, we got all the legwork, setting things up, and right now we're getting to the point of history in BattleTech that I honestly am the most fascinated with. The time of battleships, man, because this is where things are so freaking explosive everywhere. Don't get me wrong, I love the mechs. They're freaking insane. I love them. But there's some place in my heart that just loves giant-ass warships with tons of guns and missiles and the ability to jump. It's like, this is literally freaking cool. If it sounds like I'm really having a geek out moment right now, it's because I am. And I'm okay with this. You guys know the deal. There's a link below to the original video. Hit it up. And let's just jump into this.
The Age of War was a period of 150 years that saw a near constant state of conflict develop between the various states of the Inner Sphere.
Yep.
It directly followed the unification of the disparate planetary groups during the 24th century and the 25 years of peace that began in the 2370s.
Oh, there was
During the early years of humanity's expansion into space, though there was the occasional border conflict, this was nothing compared to what would follow. In many ways, though, the Age of War conjures images that are largely incongruent with the reality of those years.
Really?
The fighting that permeated this period in history was an unusual mix, primarily low-level, low-casualty border disputes, not too dissimilar to the Third Succession War, but with occasional...
I'm sorry, are you... The Third Succession War was only border disputes? You know, this might actually just be my lack of knowledge about that time frame, but I know the first two were huge, beat down, shut down, everything's dead style wars. And the fourth one was just a lot of politicking, which you got involved in through MechWarrior 5, which is actually really fun, and that was enjoyable. But I didn't realize the third one was more a war in name only by comparison to the previous. That's a weird way to put it. I mean, he didn't put it that way, but close enough. And this is not all-out warfare. Huh, I guess that happened later?
Occasional bursts of atrocities and unrestrained use of nuclear, chemical and biological weapons.
Okay, that's more what I expected.
Even still, the death toll from the combined 150 years would be surpassed by the comparatively brief reunification war that would immediately follow it. The idea of civilized warfare was one that first came to fruition during the Age of War, following the explosive Andurien War. This conflict, beginning in 2398, is today viewed as the official commencement of this dark chapter in history.
Oh.
Soon after, the Aries conventions would come into being and have a lasting impact on the way wars were contested.
Later,
the publication of the Lorix Creed would cement the idea of the warrior as someone noble and worthy of the utmost respect. This period in history would see the last of the great houses make their debut with the rise of House Steiner in the Lyran Commonwealth. It would also see the near extinction of House Kurita in the Draconis Combine, and the complete implosion of House Davion in the Federated Suns. But perhaps...
Okay, so part of that I knew, Steiner coming up, kind of figured, but the implosion of Davion and the near extinction of Kurita, that... A lot happened in this time frame that I was not expecting. Again, these are things Tex may or may not have glanced over, but whoa. Also, love this art. Freaking catapult, man.
The most significant development during the Age of War was a technological one. It was during the mid-25th century that battle mechs first took to the field, revolutionizing the art of war forever. What followed was a mad scramble as the neighbouring nations employed various methods to get their hands on their own mechs.
I hope he does cover exactly what happened.
A study of the Age of War should be encouraged by all acolytes of history, as in many ways the political fallout from this time period is still being felt today in 3025.
Oh?
But doing so comes with its challenge.
Oh, because, yeah, a lot of the issues starting here were what led to the Civil War, what led to the clans, what led to basically everything. So yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Many important documents from the period are missing, and charting the continued expansion of the great powers is difficult to accomplish with any degree of accuracy. With only fragmentary records to draw upon, there are unfortunate gaps in our knowledge.
See, every time someone says, you can't really chart the extent of the expansion, all I'm thinking is, oh, so you're saying there could be colonies farther out than the clans that just got lost due to absurd jumps that just happened to not kill them. Which is apparently a thing that happens and is also how a lot of places were founded. Like the Turians. Why do I keep saying Turians? Mass Effect's on the brain. I'm just going to admit to that one.
The first comprehensive interstellar map dates from the founding of the Star League in 2571,
well, I think they did
the culmination and conclusion to the entire Age of War. From this we can extrapolate backwards where records allow, but the further back we go, inevitably errors will creep in, particularly as we approach the borders of the periphery about which we know so little. It's quite probable that the outward expansion of nations continued gradually throughout the age, but for the sake of our analyses, we can only display the endpoint throughout. Before delving into the Age of War proper, it would be beneficial to take a brief look at the relative fortunes of the 6 major powers at the turn of the century. In the Terran hegemony, the role of Director General had passed from McKenna to his relative Michael Cameron.
Well, they were already
One
related.
particularly noteworthy reform introduced during his reign was the introduction of the peer list, a modernised form of nobility. Though these weren't hereditary titles at first, it was an idea that would disseminate across the inner sphere, and soon the rest of the neighbouring realms had their own equivalent.
Wait. The general nobility was a thing that they started, and everyone else copied? There's actually implications in there, because that would show that they're trying to produce a cultural influence beyond just the battle mech. And because people keep wanting to get Terran hegemony stuff at this point, copying them to see if they can make it easier to do that might be a good idea. So that's not a bad one. I was kind of surprised that that's where it came from. Like, the entire nobility class structures were here. I thought that would have been something else, like something that came up in Kurita or Steiner, because money. Really? Oh, wasn't expecting this to be the initial source.
This period of time also saw a gradual strengthening.
I mean, it probably existed there, but it's more
to the role of
codified
Director
now.
General. After Michael, the directorship passed through several eras before coming to rest with his grandson Brian. By the end of the century, the Camerons were so ingrained in the political landscape that even the allegation that he was behind the death of his unpopular brother wasn't enough to stop Brian from ascending to the top step of government.
Yeah.
Once in power, he began to construct so-called Castles Brian, a series of expansive fortifications across the border of the Terran hegemony.
Oh, I've heard these, because these are the ones that have the incredible wealths of resources that are basically the caches now. And that's why they're called Castle Brian's, because it was literally named for the director. Okay. I was actually wondering about that, because when I first heard the name, I was like, what? Why are you calling it a Castle Brian? That's like saying, here's my defensive armament, Bob. Sure, okay, it makes a lot more sense now if it's literally named after the guy who commissioned it.
The Federated Sons had already seen a presidency pass between half a dozen Davians in its short life. For the most part, things were going well, but a looming shadow was hanging over the nation.
Oh?
A problem of succession had developed between the twin sons of the unpopular Etienne Davian and the only child of Etienne's younger brother, Paul. Both the brothers had served as president at one point, adding further complexities to the issue. For the time being, the president of the Federated Sons was Etienne and Paul's sister, Marie, who hoped to hand the reins to Paul's son once he was old enough.
Okay, full disclosure, every time I hear about a political intrigue and involves someone named Paul, I'm just wondering, when they came up with this, how many of them had read Dune and just decided to work that in there? I mean, dear God, was his mother in maybe a group that was secretly politically involved and controlled everyone? Were they plotting out marriages? Am I the only one thinking that? Am I really the only one thinking that? Honestly, considering how popular the last movie is and the next one's coming out, probably not.
In the Draconis Combine, there was no question that it was the Kirita dynasty that would continue to inherit the role of coordinator. Shiro's son Tenno succeeded him, and afterwards Tenno's son Nihongi.
Can't be related, but
the latter had been an ineffectual ruler and had gradually alienated all of his supporters and family. Before any action was taken to remove him from power, a horse riding accident saw him lose his life, and the seat of power passed to his militant son Robert.
Oh.
Across the border in the Lyran Commonwealth, the Marsden coup had brought about a dramatic improvement for the fledgling nation. This was not to last, however, as in 2395 a botched assault against Promised Land resulted in the death of the Archon under suspicious circumstances. A military takeover was narrowly avoided with the ascension of Robert's brother, Alistair, a junior officer in the Lyran Armed Forces. The Free Worlds League remained the most democratic of all the major powers, with no single family dominating the political landscape.
Honestly, the more I learn about the Free Worlds League, the more I'm thinking, yeah, America's in charge, but it's more like in charge. They listen, but also if they got a chance to step in the back, they would gladly take it and have.
However, cracks were starting to develop between the powerful houses Marek of Atreus and Salage of Regulus. The newest of all the great powers, the Capellan Confederation, had a score to settle with its neighbours.
Wait, they count as the newest? That's actually kind of weird, because it seems so much of early history for what became the houses was kind of focused around what becomes Lao. That it feels weird that the Capellans are the newest. I mean, I guess confederating, becoming the Capellan Confederation is, or not even just becoming it, but becoming what they are now would make them the newest, but it seems weird considering how much of the history really kind of did focus on them and how they're dealing with everyone on every side of them. And then Courier is just off doing its own thing against Steiner every now and again. Or, well, I guess it's still more Lear than anything else.
Franco Liao had not long delayed in strengthening his family's ties to the seat of Chancellor, and his position was inherited by his warmonger son Kerneth.
Group. Okay.
It was he that would ultimately start the
Age
of War by
always
launching the Andurien campaign. Over the course of the next century and a half, 3 separate major wars would be fought over these worlds. The Capellans would also begin a brutal war of extremes with the Taurian Concordat. The Lyran Commonwealth would suffer a major thrust on each of its borders in the early 25th century, before beginning their infamous Long March campaign in retaliation. The only border that was relatively quiet during this time was between the Draconis Combine and Federated Suns, but that was merely because the two had not yet advanced to the point of close proximity. By the beginning of the 26th century, they too were launching constant probes and raids against each other.
Because everyone fights everyone.
By far the largest and most destructive conflict of the entire age was waged within the borders of a single state. The Davian Civil War was a 4-way battle for supremacy of enormous complexity, as various branches.
Okay, so this is during the Age of War, and what he just said is kind of blowing my mind a bit, because he's not saying that all the other houses during the Age of War are the ones really tearing into each other. It's like they are, but the Davian Civil War was worse, other than the random outbreaks of atrocities, which admittedly is more what you expect out of BattleTech.
Of the family fought for dominance.
The Andurien Wars. Oh, he covered this earlier.
The average citizen of the 31st century were to go to their local bookstore and purchase an atlas of the Inner Sphere, they perhaps notice a conspicuous absence within. One of the most infamous planets in human history, the border world of Andurien, source of so much bloodshed and arguably the progenitor to the wars that have been waging for over half a millennium, is nowhere to be found.
What?
It's no grand conspiracy, but merely the result of the collective human consciousness deciding that some things are best forgotten.
See, every time I hear that, I'm just thinking that is probably one of the planets I really want to go check out. Not because there's probably anything there, it's most likely a dead world, but because it's probably one of those worlds where someone, and like any writer, anyone doing a setting, wants to hide something, you go to the one place that no one wants to visit, and that makes it so much more interesting to hide things.
And to speak of them is to needlessly open old wounds. And so, Andurien continues to be absent in many published works today. The planet itself, first colonized by the Scion Commonwealth in the 23rd century, had been taken by the Free Worlds League in 2369, one of the numerous worlds Franco Liao had willingly traded for time while he struggled to unify his realm into a force strong enough to fight off aggressors.
Oh, this is early on, yeah.
Now though, Kerneth Liao wanted to make a name for himself by retaking those lost worlds, starting with the planets claimed by the Free Worlds League. The attack...
How far out to the periphery is this? Also, there's a Buenos Aires. Jeez, I just noticed that. Also, are the planets that have the colored in dots the populated ones, where the rest are more just like dead worlds that they have?
Attack wasn't unexpected, as Peter Marek had been elected as Captain General of the Free Worlds League a few years earlier
Marek had
in
just taken over,
anticipation. The Capellans first descended on the numerous worlds in the Andurien region, but the fighting soon spread along the entire border. Nor was the Free Worlds League the sole target of Kerneth's wrath, as in 2399, Liao forces carried out an orbital bombardment of Novaya Zemelia in the Federated Suns as retaliation for the destruction of Capella Prime.
Okay, it makes sense.
In the first 3 years of the war, things were going against the Free Worlds League, and several worlds, including Andurien, were lost. The disastrous defense of Kwamashu by Peter Marek in 2401 saw Parliament start to turn against him.
Am I the only one who wishes, like, whenever he mentioned a specific planet, there was just like a little flash of light to draw your attention to it? Honestly, that would just be so nice right now. Maybe a bit much to ask this late on, but still.
Gradually, the power and authority of the Captain Generalcy was eroded, with the intent to reduce the influence of House Marek, the traditional holders of the title. Despite this outside interference, Peter Marek was able to formulate a plan to turn the tide in his favour. He launched a deep strike raid into the heart of the Capellan Confederation, taking aim at their capital, Cyan, as well as Cordiaga and Capella. The goal was to relieve the pressure on his attackers by distracting Kerneth's commanders with attacks behind the lines.
That does usually
work. At first, the Liao forces pressed ahead, taking El Gizar and Mosiro, but were eventually forced to divert some of their forces to protect their own worlds. The momentum had now swung firmly behind Marek, and soon Liao troops were withdrawing from the planets
And
they
they
had
pulled
taken.
up a bunch and got
A
Andurien
peace
back.
agreement signed in 2404 sought to resolve the Andurien issue for good by allowing those worlds to vote as to which nation they would belong to after a period of 10 years had passed, their eventual choice being to remain with the Free Worlds League. As well as the changes on the border,
Wait, they were allowed to... Wait, what?
by allowing those worlds to vote as to which nation they would belong to after a period of 10 years had passed, their eventual choice being to remain with the Free Worlds League.
That is surprising. I mean, it's probably very much like, which one do you want to choose? These guys or the ones who currently have troops here? The fact that they even allowed it is surprising to me. The outcome, not as much, but the fact that they allowed it, yeah, that's not normal. Granted, it's
As
after
well as
10
the
years of it,
changes on
so...
the border, the Andurien War would bring about the rise of House Graham Marek and the creation of the 6th province in the Free Worlds League, the Duchy of Graham Marek.
I actually don't know much about that one.
The fuse had now been lit and violence continued elsewhere along the border. In time, this would spread to encompass the entire inner sphere. A century would pass before another Mad Liao would set his
Over
sights on
100
the
years.
Andurien
Well,
worlds
yeah,
again.
150 years
This
for the
time,
Age of
it was
War.
lust that would bring about the destruction of so many lives.
Lust?
Calvin Liao, Chancellor of the Confederation, had been making repeated advances to the daughter of the Duke of Andurien, hoping that she would join his harem of 24 wives. Rebuffed at every turn,
Okay, you know what? There's a lot of things I have heard accused against Lao, House, Capellan, General, when they cross over, when they don't. This is new to me. Okay, we're getting a Troy situation going.
Calvin was eventually spurned into action, and in 2528 launched his offensive. This time, the conflict would engulf the entire Duchy of Andurien, and Liao troops could be found everywhere from Meadowvale to Fujidera.
Oh, so this is the
Facing Calvin
Andurien
was Captain
Duchy?
General Albert
Okay.
Marek, whose superior military strategy was able to push back repeated Capellan assaults. In his anger, Calvin unleashed nuclear Armageddon on the Andurien worlds, launching the death toll into the millions. Nor was the target of the entire campaign, Lady Massilia Allard, spared from this fate, dying alongside thousands of other innocents in one of the blasts.
I mean, war crimes are a thing, and Lao is very good at doing them. Again, I'm thinking taking off right now, but still.
Only the assassination of Calvin in 2530
Oh.
allowed for an opportunity to end the conflict. His successor, Michael Yao, met with Albert on New Delos the following year at a meeting orchestrated by Deborah Cameron of the Terran Hegemony. It was agreed that the planets would be returned to the Free Worlds League, and as a restitution, the contested world of Hassad would also be offered in the treaty.
Huh. I'm assuming they also assassinated him to get him to stop being such a dumbass. Because he literally did nuclear annihilation because lady won't join my harem. I don't even... You know, there's levels of dumb shit evil, and that is up there. It's like if Amaris was much less ambitious and just more, I'm evil. And way less successful, admittedly. Honestly, actually, never mind. Nothing like Amaris.
And yet even this was not the end of the issue. Just 20 years later, the latest Chancellor, Terence Liao, saw a third Andurien campaign as a
Of
way to
course
win
they
support,
did.
and so kicked off yet another war in 2551. The aging Albert Marek returned to the field again, and by 56 had fought Liao to a standstill, again securing
many times
the
did he do
planets
that?
for the Free
3?
Worlds League.
Fuck.
This time, peace was orchestrated by Deborah Cameron's son, Ian, the new Director General of the Hegemony. The Treaty of Geneva settled the issue once and for all,
Ian.
but not in the way many expected. Having successfully won 2 campaigns, there was no doubt that Albert Marek had the strongest hand in the negotiations, but he and Ian Cameron had even greater ambitions.
And that's where we're cutting this one because, sorry, just that mention of what the greater ambitions are. And he's like, Starling! I know I'm a little disillusioned because Tex has built them up, and then also he tore them down as the videos have gone. And a lot of my worldview of BattleTech is based on that. So getting this information here, even if it's not the grand shining beacon on the hill, it is still a really cool time period if you're not in the periphery. If you're in the periphery, it sucks more than usual, but it kind of always does suck. So I'm excited to see what comes next. But this entire period, getting to hear about this, the fact that Marek was kind of kicking ass multiple times, and yet Lao is just waffling back and forth between having really good leaders and then incredibly stupid ones. is actually perfectly fitting with BattleTech the more I think about it, because they literally do that with every faction. It's like, you're the good guys now. Don't worry, we're going to give you someone who's in charge because of nepotism, and they're going to suck. I'm looking at you, Alaric. More importantly, this is freaking cool, man. I kind of wish they took more time to go into how the combat went, but that's not really what Sven focuses on. He's more focusing on the overarching aspects of how things are changing, which is really cool to get the 1,000-foot view of everything, as opposed to Tex, where he's like in the field. Again, I like both perspectives, so this is fun. I know I geek out over stuff like this. It's my like catnip. I say it a lot, but that's kind of what I focus on. This entire channel is me engaging with things that I find fun, and I like that. So if you haven't already, there's a link below to the original video. Hit it up, and if you don't, do it anyways because I said to. Yeah, no, that's creepy. Don't do that. Well, I mean, do it anyways, but you know what I mean. Basically, I'm hyped up on caffeine right now, and no, wait, that's green tea. Doesn't have caffeine. Am I this hyped without caffeine? Well, that happened. So yeah, I'll see you guys in the next one. Adios.